Good evening, and thank you for attending. My name is Denise McKelvey, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's candidate debate. Joining me is Ms. Gina Roberts with the Clean Elections Commission. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor for this evening's event. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. Participation as a clean elections candidate is strictly voluntary. The system provides full funding for qualified candidates who agree to abide by the Clean Elections Act and rules. To qualify for funding, participating candidates must illustrate the support of their constituents by gathering $5 qualifying contributions from registered voters in their legislative district. The candidates agree to adhere to contribution and spending limits and may not accept money from special interest groups. They also agree to participate in these debates. As we move into the debate, we encourage audience questions. If you have questions, please print them clearly on the card given to you when you walked in and hold it up. One of our volunteers will pick up the cards and deliver them to me. We screen the questions for clarity, to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. If you need another card, just raise your hand. There's an independent timer who will see that all the candidates have equal time to answer questions and will tell them when their time is up. Our format this evening will be opening statements, 3 minutes each, a quick lightning round, 2 minutes to answer audience questions each, and 2 minutes to answer the candidate questions. Then we'll have the closing statements at 3 minutes each. We ask that you remain polite to all the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how strongly you may agree or disagree with anything being said. This means no applause, outbursts, or cheers, except for now as we introduce the candidates. Ms. Nancy Barto is a Republican running for a seat in the state Senate. Mr. David Ryan is a Republican running for a seat in the state Senate. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name and will progress from that starting point. The closing order will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last name. Ms. Barto, will you please start the opening remarks?
Thank you. Yes, and I appreciate everyone being here tonight. My name is Nancy Barto, and I currently am your state senator in District 15. So why should I be reelected? I would just like to say that I believe that the values that I promote in the Senate, and since I've been in the legislature since 2006, very well represent those of the constituents in District 15 as well as in the entire state. For example, of the 15 bills that I sponsored this past session in 2014 and that were signed into law, every single one of them was either passed unanimously or with strong bipartisan support. So again, I believe my voting record comports with that also, that the priorities that I promote are those of Arizona, and they are basically to promote fiscal restraint and a strong economy in Arizona. We've done a lot of work in that regard since the Great Recession hit, and promoted all kinds of policies that make sure to say to people in business that Arizona is the place to be to do business. We've removed regulations, we've lowered taxes, and among other things. We've also promoted policies that protect your basic constitutional rights. And I believe most Arizonans, if not all, appreciate the work that I've done in that regard. The right to life, our precious Second Amendment, our 10th Amendment rights, and the most fundamental of all, our religious freedom. I've promoted policies that make sure that the federal government does not overreach into those rights. A good example of that is promoting the Healthcare Freedom Act to the ballot in 2009, and voters passed overwhelmingly in 2010. I think voters in LD15 can count on where I'm going to stand on the issues because I have a strong voting record. Education policy as well. I've promoted policies that raise academic standards, that try to fund what works in Arizona with the kind of accountability that we need in Arizona while protecting parents' choice to choose the kind of appropriate education that is best for their child. I've won and been recognized by many organizations as Friend of the Taxpayer, NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business, Guardian of Small Business. I've received an A this session from the Arizona Free Enterprise Club, and I would appreciate your support in the primary. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
Hello, my name is David Ryan, and I've been a registered Republican for over 30 years, a precinct committee person here in District 15 for the last 2, and now running for State Senate in Legislative District 15. This is my first time running for elected office, so I'd just like to talk a little bit about myself before I get into some priorities. I'd like to thank the voters for creating the clean elections process, and the voters in District 15 that provided the signatures for me to be on the Republican ballot this August. My wife Fran and I have lived in District 15 since 1999. Our 2 children attended public high schools, both attended ASU, and now have careers and a bright future ahead of them because of not only their hard work, but the support of excellent teachers and professors and programs at their respective schools. I've spent 35 years leading significant investment programs related to aerospace product development and enterprise information systems with GE, Allied Signal, and Honeywell. And after moving our family between 6 states, I'm now retired, working part-time in information application consulting. To me, conservative government has been about and is about assuring safety and security for our civil society, assuring an effective educational system to meet the needs of our nation, our state, our community, and of course, our families. It's also about a minimum level of laws, rules, and regulations to create a business-friendly environment for investment, to create good jobs, to make education, business, healthcare, and personal decisions at the lowest level consistent with good outcomes, and to create a level playing field to prevent good folks from taking advantage of each other. 7 years ago, through my church, I joined a Maricopa County faith-based organization called Valley Interfaith Project, and we studied basic elements of leadership in civil society, engaged, informed citizens, how the market interacts with that, government, and a free press. When those elements are balanced, civil society can exist. Arizona is currently at the bottom of job growth nationally. We're at the bottom in teacher pay. And according to a recent article, we are the 10th neediest state in the country. Neediest meaning we get $1.62 back in federal tax dollar for every tax dollar we send to Washington. 39% of our budget, of our revenue for our budget, comes from federal dollars. That creates some pluses, but certainly some negatives in how we do budgeting. I'm running for office because Arizona has the opportunity to be a leader in so many ways, but we won't get there by doubling down on current policies. We need a vision for our state that our citizens will support, a vision of prosperity and a high quality of life. We need a vision for who we want to be as a state and a strategy that focuses and prioritizes the solutions to the issues that support that strategy. We need to develop the talent in Arizona while attracting new talent to invigorate our industrial base.
Thank you. Now we'll move into the lightning round. In an attempt to lighten the mood for tonight's debate, we are going to do a quick lightning round of this or that. This will allow us to get to know the candidates, and please just answer with one word. We'll start with you, Mr. Ryan. Droid, iPhone, or Windows?
iPhone.
Ms. Bartow, CNN, Fox News, or MSNBC?
Fox News.
Mr. Ryan, Facebook or Twitter?
Facebook.
Ms. Bartow, Mac or PC?
PC.
Mr. Ryan, lumberjack, sun devil, or wildcat?
Sun Devil.
Ms. Bartow, Droid, iPhone, or Windows?
iPhone.
Thank you. Now let's move on to our debate questions. We'll start with Ms. Bartow. There are only Republicans running in District 15 for this election, but there are more non-Republicans living in the district than Republicans. How do you plan on representing all of the citizens?
Thank you for the question. I plan on representing them the same way as I have over these past few years, and that is by having an open-door policy on every issue. I work with Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and whoever else might come to my door or my office or pick up the phone and give me a call. Being the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee has given me an opportunity to work with so many different constituencies on issues important to Arizona. And so I think my voting record reflects the fact that I work well across the aisle and within my own party to have the most bills by percentage signed into law this session. And over the past few years, I've got the same type of voting record and bill success number. I appreciate so much the opportunity to be able to serve and be able to solve problems. That's one of the biggest issues, that's one of the things that keeps us so busy. Besides running for office, we have so many issues and responsibilities of oversight in our state and opportunity to help, especially in the healthcare arena, move forward legislation that's going to keep up with the changing healthcare issues that are happening throughout the country and in the state. Solving issues such as the problems we've had with CPS. People on all sides of the aisle, both sides and independents, are concerned about the welfare of our children and that we solve this problem listening to all sides of the issue. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
So I've been, like I said, a Republican for many years. My life outside of work has been very active in my community. For over 30 years in 6 different states, I've always plugged into the community, chipped in, whether it was leading a reading program in a couple different cities, doing individual tutoring for folks, or now being on a board of directors for the largest domestic violence shelter here in the state. These issues aren't Republican or Democrat. Right? They cross all party lines. They cross all ethnic, culture, religious boundaries. And so my heart is certainly invested in looking across where people need a hand up. For people that can't help themselves, I'll be there. As a state or as a person, I've just an approach that if people can do something by themselves, they need to do that. I would do that as a public leader as well. People need to take responsibility for themselves as a society. Through our education programs, for example, our schools, we need to provide ladders of opportunity. So when it comes to serving the community, I don't see boundaries. As my, from a personal guiding principles perspective, I'm just I'm conservative with my own money. I'm conservative with other people's money. I'm just very focused on making sure that the system works and that we have a vision as a state that moves us forward, I think.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Ryan. Please explain your position on voter ID requirements. I
think everybody should have a form of ID, and whether that's getting on an airplane or getting a rental car, any of the public services that we access that put a responsibility on an individual. I think that you know, not only for it applies to everything. Buying a gun, we ought to have ID. But specifically for voters, I know there's many situations across the state in different communities, Native American communities, elderly. There are some special situations. I think as a society, we need to work towards getting ID to every citizen in this state, so that when they do vote, when they do register, they have a way of identifying themselves appropriately.
Thank you. Ms. Bardo?
I believe voter identification is very important in the voting process. We need an ID in order to do practically everything else in society, from boarding an airplane to cashing a check. So what more important aspect of society is there than expressing your right to vote and being accountable to that vote and making sure that nobody is voting in your stead, or that people that shouldn't be voting are voting? I believe it's fundamental.
Thank you. Next question, Ms. Barto. What is your position on the Common Core curriculum?
I am very much in support of high academic standards, but I believe that the Common Core does not fit that bill, and I oppose Common Core. Like many seasoned educators across the country who are right now presently implementing Common Core in their schools, who originally signed on to the standards and have become very disenchanted with them, I believe that they are only an avenue for federal control at the end of the day, and they are not the high standards that they were cracked up to be. I believe that they haven't been tested well enough, that the people that were involved in their formation didn't know much about teaching, didn't involve educators, and they have not proven to be the rigorous type of standards that they have been sold to be. They may be rigorous in the sense that they focus on certain types of learning, certain types of things that students need to know, but at a depth that is not adequate to advancing the kind of education that I think we need to expect for the next generation. They're more tedious than rigorous, and I believe that we should join the 4 states that have decided to repeal them. Arizona should be the 5th.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
So I spoke about education being important from a national perspective as well as state, community, and family. Education is what unites our country. It's a national security. At some point, it's a national security issue, that we have a strong educational foundation for our country. I am absolutely in support of strong standards that cover as many states as possible. We don't need a federal program, but the Common Core was developed by 45 states, ostensibly by educators and the governors of those states. I know there's a tremendous amount of information out there about exactly who developed it. I am for standards that cover as many of our states as possible, that elevate our kids, elevate the bar for our kids in school. I've read many of the standards myself, both the mathematics and the writing. It's a challenging set of standards. It's not the curriculum. My put would be that we need to, if there's issues with the standards as Arizona, we need to fix them. We have to press forward with standards that elevate the bar for our kids, elevate the bar for all teacher performance and school performance. And like I said, if there's issues with the standards as the state of Arizona, we ought to fix it. And if there's issues with the curriculum, and that's local control, that ought to be addressed at the local level. If there's testing issues, we ought to address that at the state level.
Thank you. Next question for you, Mr. Ryan. What is your position on the current and future of gun laws?
Wow. Absolutely believe in the Second Amendment, believe in the right to carry guns, believe in the folks to use it for self-protection and for hunting, for recreational purposes. Where I would come down, and we've all seen the tragedies unfold across the country. The numbers that I am familiar with, looking over the last several years where mass shootings occur, there were mental issues with the people that shot those guns. As a society, and I would look at all organizations, both the National Rifle Association being the largest, but also weapons manufacturers and ammunition manufacturers. As a society, it's not enough to sit back and say it's somebody else's problem. As a society, we have to come together and say there are certain boundaries as a community that we have to define. And I believe, I know there's laws about people that are classified as mentally ill not being able to hold guns, but there are ways around that. And I think as a society, that is a place that we can start and come together and talk about guns responsibly. And that's my point.
Thank you. Ms. Bardo.
Thank you. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment and have promoted bills in the legislature that have been signed into the law that strengthen those rights for Arizona citizens, and promoted several pieces of legislation this session as well that were not signed into law but really should be. So in answer to that question, I think we do need to strengthen our gun laws to make sure that we are allowing that people who lawfully can carry guns can take them places where they can't right now without a big problem and without endangering themselves and their families and others around them. I believe the gun-free zones are a danger to the public health, and they need to be addressed as such. The schools and other public buildings are the most dangerous places in the state. This session, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't address gun violence and other types of violence that are promoted oftentimes by the mentally ill and challenged. And I've supported legislation to make sure that the NICS, that the organization that tracks people that are prohibited possessors cannot get guns. And we passed legislation this session that I'm proud of supporting. Unfortunately, the perception of gun violence is greater than reality. There's a fear of guns. And even though in less than 2 decades the gun murder rate has been nearly cut in half, about only 12% of Americans surveyed said that gun crime had actually declined compared with 2 decades ago. So I think perception needs to catch up with reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bardo, the next question. Please identify what you consider to be the most pressing issue in your district and how you will address it if elected.
Thank you for the question. I believe that the greatest threat to our future is fiscal irresponsibility and federal control. We're losing our individual and state rights. And I was involved in 2009 at the Capitol when we hit the fiscal cliff on the Great Recession, and we had to cut over $3 billion from a $10 billion budget. And during that time, it was very difficult to deal with that, just like it's been very difficult for families. But the recession has only climbed, we've only climbed out of the recession at a very slow rate. And the pressure to overspend, like the federal government is doing at the state level, is acute. I think there's kind of there's a thinking by many in the state that we just have endless money and we have to ignore reality. But we can't do that. Right now, we are promoting education funding and restoring education funding to the level only $138 million short of the highest point of spending in 2008. And we're expanding our resources and revenues and spending to the level that's going to put us in a straitjacket again if we don't keep in mind that there's a limit to our revenues. And rather than focus on spending, we have to focus on the economic growth.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
So that was the greatest threat to the legislative district?
The question is, please identify what you consider to be the most pressing issue in your district and how you will address it if elected.
Okay, I would, the most pressing issue to me, and it goes back to the original question. District 15 is a third independent and I believe 44% Republican, 23% Democrat. I worry about apathy by the broader citizenry, right? We need engaged citizens from all perspectives. Wisdom comes from all perspectives. We like to think as Republicans that we have, we certainly are the strongest team out there. But as any good manager of a team knows, there's other wisdom out there, right? And we need to be able to tap into that. And so as a political body, as a precinct committee team, the things that we can do to engage greater participation by more voters, I think is, to me, is the top issue. If I could use the rest of my minute, I would say two of the things that I think we need to do more in our district is we have some wonderful preserved land. If you're a nature lover, a hiker, biker, wonderful preserved land in North Phoenix that would love to continue to preserve and make available for future generations. We also have a wonderful opportunity along Mayo Boulevard for a biomedical corridor. It could be an absolute huge job generator and economic tax base for the city of Phoenix, but also it sits right in District 15. So a great opportunity that as a state and then as a city, we need to work together to make that happen.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Ryan. Mm-hmm. What do you believe needs to be done to secure our border?
I have a very different perspective on the border. Mexico is the world's 13th largest economy, and there's ocean access 100 miles from our border. The state of Texas, for all the border issues that they have, we have the same issues. They have figured out how to have tremendous economic ties with Mexico, tremendous international trade. And the same thing, we can have that in Arizona. We can turn a problem into a positive. We have got, in my opinion, we have got to figure out a way to work with the Mexican state directly to our south. And it requires some policy work, but once the policy work is laid, I believe a lot of public-private investment would welcome the opportunity, both if we talk about access to the ocean for pipelines, for power generation, for investment in manufacturing. Mexico is the second most rapidly growing country in terms of GDP in this hemisphere, second only to Brazil. Extremely rapidly growing countries, and we have an opportunity. we can continue to double down and imprison unknown number of folks for coming into Arizona. Or we can work, we have 2 senators with tremendous respect at the Senate level. We can work with the federal government to control our borders, come up with a solution that controls it to people's satisfaction, and find a way to make investment and trade work for Mexico, create jobs in Mexico, and create jobs in Arizona. So I would be very much around infrastructure investment, around pipelines, railroads, interstate highways. North America has the opportunity to be an economic powerhouse in this world if we can find the vision to be able to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Bardo?
Well, I believe the border crisis that we're experiencing right now is evidence that we need more border enforcement and that the border is not secure. And it's a problem. The federal government is responsible for taking care of that problem, and we certainly have the technology and the fiscal ability to put those dollars at the border. Many sectors of the southern border have been successfully closed, but not all, and we're seeing the balloon popping up in areas where it's not secure. The fact that we have almost 300,000 women and children, some of them unaccompanied, coming over the border over the last few months is not only a humanitarian crisis, it is that, but it is potentially a huge public safety issue, public health issue, and it's a national security issue. Arizona has to press on the federal government and not agree to any kind of comprehensive immigration reform bill until that border is secure and this crisis is dealt with to the satisfaction of our people. We are not getting information about what is actually happening. 75% of those coming over are other than Mexicans, and many of them are from Africa, where they're experiencing huge dengue fever and Ebola crises, health crises, and we're not getting, I don't think, enough transparency out of the federal government. Our officials in the state were not given a heads up about what was happening, and I have yet to know what kind of information we're getting on an ongoing basis to keep the public safe. I'm concerned.
Thank you. Next question for Ms. Bardo. Do you support Governor Brewer's decision last year to expand Medicaid?
No, I did not. I voted against the Medicaid expansion. I think we made a very big mistake. The legislature unconstitutionally passed it because and did not respect the voters' will through Prop 105 by passing a tax increase with a 2/3 majority that's constitutionally required. But we've done more damage than that by signing on to Obamacare in this way and expanding Medicaid. We've forced our state into a long-term contract by putting ourselves in a fiscal bind. We know that at the federal level, we're borrowing just as much money as we're making at this point. Our GDP is the same as our debt, and it's a crisis. And to expand a program that's fueling that crisis makes no sense. We've also not done the people that are on the program any favors. Constitutionally, we were supposed to expand Medicaid up to 100% of the poverty, that federal poverty level at the ballot. That's what the voters passed. Through Obamacare, we expanded beyond. And those people that fit in between 100 and 133% would have been able to get private health insurance through the exchanges. Instead, they're forced onto Medicaid. And they'll find it harder to transition onto a private health insurance program. It's bad news all around, and I think it needs to be repealed. the federal government didn't expect any states to refuse their bribe, but 21 states did, and Arizona should have been one of them.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
Yeah, here in Arizona, we have one of the highest poverty rates in the country, and folks are going to get their medical care one way or the other, right? So, and if it's a dire emergency, they're going to go to the hospitals. My hometown, where my wife and I grew up, St. Clair's Hospital, ended up closing down because of bankruptcy, because of uncompensated care. Through this Valley Interfaith Project group that I participated with, we talked with many of the administrators from different hospitals, from different in the healthcare industry, and many of the people who would be affected, whether Medicaid was expanded or not. Based on just my perspective, what I saw there, and the math, right? If you do just going through the math, it was an overall benefit to Arizona to sign up to that. It was a benefit to tens of thousands more of folks to get basic access to health care. That is, Nancy, is Ms. Bartow correctly points out, it's a longer-term contract. Right now, we're covered at a very high percentage through 3 years. People are very concerned about what happens after 3 years. If our economy tanks, if the government goes bankrupt, it's a big deal. It'd be a big deal for the nation if that occurred. That is not something I don't think that worry that's several years out in the future is something that should stop us from looking after our state of Arizona right now. This issue was really about the state of Arizona and what's right for the next several years. We've made painful cuts, as Ms. Bartow pointed out, several years ago to balance our budget when we had to. And if there is a national calamity, budget cutbacks, bankruptcies, we'll have to face that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan, what would you suggest to keep and bring businesses to the state?
I think it's all about education. There was a conference of economists recently, just in the last couple months, that talked about Arizona being last in the recovery, 49th out of 50 states in terms of job recovery and nationally. The rest of the country has recovered 100% of the jobs lost. Certainly a different mix of jobs, but we all seen in the news over 100%. Arizona still has only recovered about 50% of those jobs. The economists were saying that they felt it was because of our perceived education system in the state of Arizona. Looking at, my daughter works up in behavioral health in Colorado, in Denver. And the state of Denver, or state of Colorado, years ago made a decision. They were flat on their back. They made a decision that they are going to invest in education. They are going to be a business-friendly state, and that they are going to do the things necessary to keep their young talent at home. And boy, have they succeeded. You can see that in the city of Denver, just a prosperous, bustling city. It's a magnet for large corporations and small business, and most especially for the young talent that makes a vibrant community. My concern is in this state, we are not taking into account the thousands and thousands of young, highly educated people that are making the decision to move out of the state to what they believe are better places. And we can continue to do that. We can double down on that, or we can make a change.
Thank you. Ms. Bartow.
Yes, I think we need to keep on the course that we're going, and that is to make sure and put the welcome mat out for all businesses, whether they are here incubating or we're trying to attract them from other states. We are recovering slower than other states. That is absolutely true, but we are also hit the hardest in the nation, especially our housing industry. We've only recovered about half the jobs in construction. But we are on a good course, And I believe the way we have handled our state budget with fiscal responsibility, streamlining our sales tax system, which was extremely complicated. We got that done in 2013. We passed other pro-business bills, like making sure that there's transparency in business, in government, and we have efforts that are ongoing to build on those streamlining efforts for businesses. Education excellence certainly is a factor in attracting businesses and families to Arizona. Arizona's been a leader in school choice, and I believe that's attractive to the nation. We are also making sure that education is excellent by leading and expecting more from our education dollars. What we've done by promoting Move On When Reading efforts and transparent labeling, giving districts the opportunity to hire and fire at will rather than through tenure. These are making a difference. The competition that school choice brings is raising all boats. We also have to make sure and talk about what's good and going on well in Arizona, like the bioscience industry.
Thank you. Next question for Ms. Bardo. How do you feel about the recent Supreme Court ruling in favor of Hobby Lobby?
I believe that it was a very important ruling, and I think all Americans, this wasn't just for Christians, this ruling will impact everybody in the country, whether they understand that fact or not. Religious freedom is foundational to every other freedom that we cherish in this country. Furthermore, what the ruling really did was it clarified that a person doesn't have to leave their faith at the door of their house or their church when they decide to enter the marketplace, that they can exercise their religious faith freely when they open a business. And that very much clarified and undergirded our efforts in promoting Senate Bill 1062. It justified our efforts. We were trying to do the exact same thing and bring those protections to business owners here in the state so that they too could follow their beliefs. It's not enough to just have beliefs. You've got to be able to exercise them. And I think the court did a good job in explaining what the difference between those was. Having a belief is holding it within yourself. Being able to freely exercise your belief means action or inaction. And so I'm gratified that our religious liberty still means something in the United States of America.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, religious expression and democracy are somewhat at tension, in tension. My perspective on that decision was that I think when we tried to legislate, a decade or two ago, there was a federal law passed that gave religion a special place in American law. It recognized that religion is foundational to our society. And although we are predominantly a Christian nation, we are a nation of many faiths. And this federal law recognized that. And so when situations like this come down, courts will often side with a religious perspective or a religion perspective. My own concern, and no, I was disappointed in the decision. I don't, as a society, I think legislating religious values can be very difficult, and it can create a slope towards unintended consequences. To be able to be convicted in my faith, and Ms. Bartow brings up, and to be asked to in a public service way or public accommodation, to provide accommodation to someone who is different than me. My faith is inclusive. I respect another person, but I hold my values deeply. I hold my values for my family and the people I associate with, and so I think decisions like that, just short message, we shouldn't legislate religion.
Thank you. Our last debate question for the evening. Mr. Ryan, what is your position as it relates to Empowerment Scholarship Account Program? Should it be expanded?
I think the whole concept of, I think we're also talking in terms of vouchers and talking in terms of using tax dollars to expand choice of schools. School choice in the state of Arizona took off a couple of decades ago. We have been leaders in the country. Many notable successes in that area. That covers approximately 18% of our K through 12 kids. So roughly, a very significant percentage of our kids are in public schools. Coming from a family that grew up in public schools, traveling across the country in many different states, being part of wonderful public school systems that were the centers of their community. I think we're venturing too much and too fast when it comes to opening it up too broadly to choice across the state. I think in measured doses and evaluating performance of online communities, various charter schools, individual schools, as well as networks of schools, we have an established tradition in this country of public education that has served our nation very well. And so as a state of Arizona, I think it's great that we are an innovative state, that we're exploring opportunities like that. But I would just caution that we go slow with that.
Thank you. Ms. Bartow?
Well, I believe that no child should be stuck in a failing school, and parents should make the determination of what education is best for that child. And their tax dollars ought to support their decision. I fully support the Education Scholarship Account Program and hope that it expands to those students that lack it now. This past session, we proposed that children in zip codes that had a lot of failing schools in it would be included in the program. Unfortunately, it didn't make it all the way through this session, but that's a prime example of just the type of student that needs to have a way out of a failing school. School choice, as I said, in Arizona is one of the hallmarks of success in our state, and we should be promoting more of it and building on that success, whether it's online education, homeschool, charter schools, public charters, district charters, or public education. It's injecting that much needed competition into one of the sectors left that hasn't had any for decades. And the proof is in the pudding when we see our academic standards lowered and students not getting the education that they deserve.
Thank you. At this time, each of the candidates will have the opportunity to ask a question of their opponent. The first question is from Ms. Bartow for Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Ryan, are you in favor of legalizing marijuana in Arizona?
That was a question, we, as candidates, we get a lot of surveys, right? So And so just a whole variety of different topics. Let me cut to the short answer, then I'll do an explanation. Or, you know, I suppose I was thinking I'd do the explanation, then people would wait for the answer. But I am not for opening it up right now. I'm for medical marijuana. I am for looking at the experiments that are going up in Washington and Colorado. I think a year goes by, what went on in Colorado is going to be no big deal. I really do. I mean, when we look at the level of alcohol abuse that goes on in our society, the devastating legal narcotic abuse that goes on in this country, I think somebody smoking pot, and we can talk about its different strengths and severities, is so far down the pipeline, or so far down a scale of things that we ought to be worrying about and imprisoning people about and giving them felonies. We talk to the younger generation, and there's a whole generation out there that's listening very intently to this discussion. We are giving so many young people felonies that's going to follow them the rest of their life. Many of them sitting in prison. I think I'm just beyond upset by that. That we would do that to the kids. First off, I think, just like alcoholism, I think drug abuse is a medical issue, and it's not something we should be imprisoning people for. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question from Mr. Ryan to Ms. Bardo.
I don't have a good one for you, Nancy.
Want me to give one to myself?
Well, no, let me do one. I'll do one. I got to do this. Okay. So I've been was on the Foster Care Review Board for a couple years, 2012 and 2013. I mentioned I'm with the Domestic Violence Shelter for a lot of years. My wife is helping a young lady age out of foster care. And so we see so much close up. And we see these families spiraling out of control, and that's what gets in the news, right? Is all the kids that, and now we have an army, a bigger army of CPS workers helping put the system back together again, or helping these kids. Several years ago, we cut early intervention programs, or at least cut back because of the recession. Would you support increasing early intervention programs to meet families at their point of crisis?
I appreciate the question. I've been working on this issue for several years myself, and have family members that have adopted, are fostering currently, know a lot of people in that boat, served on the foster care. I haven't, but I know people who have served on the foster care review boards, been concerned about the type of care, behavioral health care, that the children receive once they're in the system, and worked on that issue, concerned about the over-prescribing that is done on behalf of these children so that they are basically zoning out. So, and was in full support of the reform for the Department of Child Safety and implementing it as a separate agency. I think there are a lot of programs that we have either eliminated altogether or had to cut back tremendously due to the recession, and that's one of them. I do agree that the early intervention program is worthwhile. I think all programs, though, need more oversight, and that's my biggest concern with this new agency, is we've given them everything they've asked for in terms of funding and people, and basically policy, but it's going to need dedicated oversight going forward, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that if you re-elect me.
Thank you. We will now start our closing statements. The first closing statement will be given by Mr. Ryan.
So I mentioned at the start, I'm new to this. I have I've always respected elected officials, the people that go out and and whether they actually make it through the process or not. But the ones that are able to make it through the process, be elected, and actually be reelected after that is a real testament, in my opinion, to the people that do that. Just doing this for the first time, getting on the ballot, it was a big deal. It was difficult. But I do want you to know that with my background, managing large projects, big enterprise information systems, grounded in business, what business needs to operate, both business and small business. Very sensitive to the issues of our children. And I absolutely believe as a state we have to find ways of meeting families, the vulnerable families at their point of crisis, help them through whatever point of crisis that is so that they can stay together and be self-sufficient long term. My top 3 priorities as a state senator would be to focus on economic development and education. Right? We're like I said, last in rebounding from the recession. We're ranked last in teacher pay, and not all that well overall in education as a state. Very focused on child safety. There's some very innovative private-public partnerships that can be arranged with our shelters in the valley and caseworkers that I think would be help keep families together and do that in more cost-effectively than we do right now. And as I mentioned, my position on the border, absolutely have to control the border. But I tell you what, as a state experiencing some of the worst problems, and maybe next to Texas, in terms of effectively dealing with the border issues, the humanitarian crisis that's occurring, and the daily illegal immigration, we have got to stop fighting about it and come up with a solution. And as a state with 2 senior senators representing the federal government, as a state, we've got 2 great partners that we've got to figure out how to come up with a plan, whether that happens this year or it happens 2 years from now. As a state, we got to figure out how to get that done. And so I would use infrastructure investment, tight border control policies, and through that private-public investment, create a very significant trade corridor that would benefit both Mexico and the United States.
Thank you. Ms. Bardo.
Thank you. I think what we need to do to have a successful government and a successful state is to promote economic development. And the way to do that is to continue to promote Arizona as a low-tax, low-regulatory environment. That's going to attract businesses, as well as an excellent education system, and provide the revenues that we need for the spending that we need for so many of the programs and the responsibilities that government is responsible for, including our infrastructure, public safety, and to continue to fund education at the level it requires. Right now, half of our budget is dedicated to education. I expect that to continue. But we've got to make sure that we're getting the excellence out of that funding going forward, that the dollars stay in the classroom. I also think what we need to do is continue to fight back against federal overreach in every area that it's happening, whether it's healthcare or the EPA and other energy mandates, or education. These are vital to our individual and state freedoms. I propose that we seriously look at using the Constitution to do that. Congress is not going to reform itself, and I believe the Article 5 process is something we ought to look at to help the federal government get a hold of some of the issues that they're struggling with in terms of a balanced budget. And it will help focus our citizens on what's actually happening in terms of spending and looking at how we can be more fiscally responsible, not only in our private lives but in our government. And another thing I believe is extremely important to Arizona is state agency accountability. A tremendous amount of responsibility is placed in the legislature because of our divided branches of government. And oversight over those agencies in order to not only make sure that they are doing their primary job of serving the public, but also being fiscally responsible with those dollars is absolutely vital. And I think I've done a good job with that. Whistleblowers are coming out of the woodwork every time we open the newspaper, and they need to be listened to and protected. For more information, please go to nancybartow.com, and I appreciate your support in August. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. To our candidates, we thank you very much for participating in our forum tonight. And we thank all of you who took the time out to come and inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to find out more about clean elections and the candidates running for office by visiting www.azcleanelections.gov. A video of this debate, as well as other clean elections debates, will be posted on that site within 72 hours of a scheduled debate. Thank you all for coming, and have a safe trip home.